All right. Well, I don't see anybody else coming in. If they come in, they're certainly welcome. Um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Hackaba. I'm one of the partners here. Myself and our other partner, Rebecca Shepard, typically try to do these check-ins with our clients. Or if you're not a client, maybe you're an accountant affiliated with one of the clients or one of the leaders within the companies, but we try to do these touch-in events, touch-based events, just to keep you informed. If you have any questions that come up, I don't think you can unmute yourselves, but if you want to put it in the chat, I will try to run through those as well. Before I get into any of that, I just want to make sure you all understand what's been going on in the ERC space generally. There's a lot of moving parts these days in government that we're seeing on the news and trying to follow along and keep up. Where ERC is generally is they started processing again. Really last June was when the big announcement was made. We started seeing processing in late summer, and that sort of has continued. It slowed a little bit around the holidays, generally because they reset their computer systems for the next filing season, and that sort of slows everything down. But over the last couple of weeks, continuing to see consistent processing. It's not floodgates, and we'll talk a little bit about trends, but the one big takeaway was, last December, I was in a conference in Las Vegas. The commissioner came and spoke, and he made some very interesting comments where he said, they've identified another 500,000 that they're going to process in 2024. And then he said, another 500,000 to 600,000 that they're going to process in 2025. And he made comments that we'd be done with this thing in 2025. Fast forward to where we're at, Commissioner Werfel has resigned effective the date, January 20th. President Trump has indicated he intends to appoint as the new commissioner a gentleman named Billy Long. I haven't seen any movement on that appointment, but Billy Long is an interesting choice for commissioner. He doesn't necessarily have a tax background, but he worked in the ERC space from 2020 through now until his appointment, working on these cases. So we tend to think that he will be a friend to the program, and may come in and process these refunds. That would be a great result. But again, I don't think he's given his information to the Senate Finance Committee to yet have a hearing or anything like that. I haven't seen a hearing scheduled or anything. As part of the announcement last summer, the commissioner then sort of suggested that this was going to be a first in, first out type of a processing where they would focus first on returns that were filed before the moratorium in September. That doesn't really seem to be the case. What they seem to be processing, or what he meant by a reference to time, is that they're processing Q2 2020 claims and then moving on to Q3, Q4. At the same time, they are processing on the other side, Q3 of 2021, where there are disallowances. Those are typically where those are coming from. There is a court case in Arizona called ERC Today that is dealing with the systemic disallowance of some of these refund claims. We're tracking that, and it's been interesting to see what the government's been able to reveal as far as what this algorithm is that they've built that is evaluating these claims, and the relative risk to the government is how they portray it. but that continues to be ongoing. Beyond that, I guess there is still possible legislation related to the employer retention credit. There is a House Ways and Means memo that is discussing the potential things they might try to put in a tax bill. We certainly anticipate a tax bill this year because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, many of the provisions are sunsetting. And so certainly they're going to have to address the expiring provisions. They're going to extend some of the provisions that folks like in that TCJA, and they're going to have to pay for the extension and expansion of some of those programs. So one of the items that's listed in a House Ways and Means Committee is to, again, go back and terminate the program effective January 31st, 2024. They've identified that as a $70 to $75 billion savings to the government, which, since they do tax bills with budget reconciliation rules, is going to, they're going to have to get it somewhere if they're going to add spending to it. So just something to continue to track. Beyond that, I don't have any insider baseball. The other stuff that is continuing to pick up is the refund claim litigation. So, to the extent, and all of you at this point are in this situation where you've been waiting longer than 6 months for, processing, you remain able to initiate litigation. There's probably around 100 cases now nationwide, and starting to see settlements in these cases. And they're starting to pick up speed. So, Rebecca, hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So with that, I mean, that's sort of the lay of the land of everything that's out there. Happy to answer questions, or if there are specific things that you may want to hear about. I know that some of you have sent us specific questions. They are in my inbox. I will get to them this week about your specific situation. We can talk about it here, but we certainly don't have to. But I guess, Rebecca, is there anything you want to? You don't know what I said, so you're sort of at a distance.
I'm sure it was excellent.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you said.
I know. All right, so there are some questions. Do you have the information on when there will be IRS refunds for amounts 500,000 to $1 million? So yeah, I mean, that is certainly part of the trend that we're seeing, that they're smaller refund claims. Whether that is intentional versus the reality that they're looking mostly at Q2 2020, which is likely to be smaller anyway, because you may have PPP offsets, or the credit is just computed as a smaller amount, is unclear, but that is certainly the trend. Most of the refunds that are happening at lower dollar amounts. And no one that I'm aware of has had every quarter processed after the moratorium, after all the slowdown and that kind of stuff. So there have been a couple. I mean, I've seen a couple 7-figure refunds, but they've been few and far between.
Neil is asking, based on the possible legislation to end the ERC effective January 31st, we have clients that are eligible 2020 quarters based on a significant decline in gross receipts. Would you still file them, or do you think doing so is more likely than not a waste of time? You can't get what you don't try for. Right now, the statute is April 15th of 2025. The government is anything but clear as of right now. So if you feel comfortable in their eligibility and they are aware that it may not work, I would still say to file those claims.
Yeah.
What's the potential impact of the DOGE influence here obstructing these payouts?
Yeah, I did write Doge on my notes. As something potentially we would be covering. Who knows?
It's really unclear. Yeah. I think our thoughts when we talk to people about this is like it could be a really good thing, this administration, and that everything starts to process and um it's less of a concern, or it could be the opposite where everything goes to more of a standstill than it is now and we'll have to litigate even more claims. We really don't know.
Really.
Uh, Paul Higgins wants you to give more details on the Stentam lawsuit.
So there's two Stentam lawsuits. The first one is an effort to invalidate Notice 2021-20 and the government's reliance on it. The second one is the ERC today, joined by Stentam, and that is an effort to unwind disallowances and basically say you can't run a computer algorithm. Both of these issues, they've been briefed and we're awaiting decisions from the courts. But that's generally what they're trying to accomplish through those pieces of litigation. There's another one called SoCal Medical that is also an attack on the notice that is also pending with no decision.
What are you thinking on amended returns for 21, given the doubt as to whether ERC will ever be collected? What I keep hearing from the government is that they understand the amended income tax return issue is the biggest issue pressing accountants, and that they are working diligently in getting an answer out to the public.
We keep hearing that they're going to come out with an answer. We think the answer is probably they're going to say, put it on your return for the year that you received it. I don't know how they do an end run around statutory code sections and valid regulations, but stay tuned. We'll see something. They've done it before.
Sure. Do you think there's still a strong likelihood that there's an extension on the statute of limitations? The IRS has to review ERC claims. Unclear.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to if they take the whole
You have to plop it in.
the whole bill from last time and plop it in, then yeah, I mean, so that bill's been introduced twice to extend the statute to 6 years from the date of the payment, which is wild.
Right. Gives the government no incentive to actually process the claims because their audit statute doesn't change.
Well, and it gives the government the authority to control the statute, which
Right.
typically it does not.
It's supposed to, it's not the point. Answer these questions. How does a company go about contracting with you for legal representation? Give us a call and we can talk about it, run a conflict check and discuss what we think is a good strategy. Regarding claims.
Just got a letter from the Taxpayer Advocate Service. Is there any significance to that?
So the taxpayer advocate will communicate in a lot of different ways, either by phone, by fax, or by letter. There's no specific significance to the fact that it's a letter versus a phone call. It's just who that advocate is and how they like to communicate. Usually that letter says we're working on your case and we'll let you know if there's anything to be done. If that is not the case, let us know and we can talk about it. Is the audit window back to 6 years now that Trump is back? The audit window is not changed as of right now. It's still 3 years from the date the original return was filed or deemed filed. Or, I mean, if it hasn't been paid yet, then they can continue to audit you. And that's usually the audit that we see is people that have not been paid. I have one where the client was paid, and that is a little bit trickier. And then there's also erroneous refund statute where the government thinks they can claw back a payment within 2 years. There's still some dispute about that, but that's happened also. To you mentioned a prospective director IRS was in the ERC space. In what capacity? What did you say?
I mentioned Billy's background. I don't know exactly what his capacity was. I suspect it was in sales. There's a couple of videos floating around about his
You
positions
can Google him and
on
see.
ERC. Yeah, but I don't know what his position is going to be as the commissioner. Like I said, certainly some people have said we think that he's going to come in and push the button and pay everybody. I could see a scenario where he makes commitments during the confirmation hearings that he's going to recuse himself from anything related to it and ask the deputy commissioner to handle all of it. The deputy commissioner now, who is acting, has proceeded in the same way as Commissioner Werfel. I don't know if the acting commissioner stays around once Congressman Long takes the helm.
Assuming he gets.
Just don't know. There have been some strong questions asked of the possible commissioner by some of those in Congress. We'll see what kind of answers they get through the confirmation process. We'll see if the Senate Finance Committee does anything about it.
Have you seen any partial disallowances resolved in the taxpayer's favor? We had a partial disallowance and received cash the check for the partial payment, also received interest in the partial amount. Yeah, we've seen a ton of them. Usually the partial disallowances are just IRS error, and it's systematic, and unfortunately the IRS has not fixed that error. And so we have to continue to send in the responses, but we've seen a positive response in that.
And fairly responsive response, like timely responses.
Some of them are very timely and some of them are not, which is not great. But some of them are like within 3 weeks. So it all depends, I guess, on like who gets it first and how they look at them. I believe claims are put into 3 risk classes, low, medium, and high, based on the prevalence of fraud. Is that still part of their processing timeline? We have no idea.
Well, I mean, we kind of do. Douglas O'Donnell had a declaration that supported the IRS's opposition to a motion for preliminary injunction in the ERC Today case, acknowledging that fact, or acknowledging that the commissioner made that statement and they were otherwise doing work in furtherance of that. What they categorically refused to provide was what they were using to decide what bucket everything went into.
But I'll say, well, one, in December, Commissioner Werfel said that they've figured out where the fraud is and where the fraud's not, and that they're processing the returns. And we have not seen any real difference in how they're processing now as to how they were prior to that statement. And I have a client where they processed Q3 2021 and haven't processed Q1 2021. So
that's an outlier though, right? Like they're mostly
maybe, yeah,
Q2.
sure. But still, like to say that, like, I don't know, it's not clear what they're doing. The statute of limitations of 3 years for the audit has passed in state of filing. Can they still change the audit period? Yes. Through the
Yeah,
legislation.
there's case law that's old, but certainly support for the idea that they could retroactively change something like that. Who knows what the Supreme Court would do if it came to that, but Congress certainly thinks they can do it. Has having an opinion from a law firm help clients keep the refunds? I don't think a legal opinion necessarily carries the day. I think it may lead an auditor to the right answer where they don't have great understanding of this stuff. But at the end of the day, in audits and appeals, all that kind of stuff, you're dealing with another person across the table. So, you've got to figure out what is going to get them to yes, right? It may be a legal opinion. It may also be sitting down with them and just walking them through every little thing. Look at this page, look at that page. Now, did you see this? Everybody's a little bit different. And when you're in these situations, you've got to figure out who's across the table.
What is our process when an ERC is processed? So we check transcripts for all of our clients on Monday, and we'll see if there's been any change. And if so, then we'll look to see if there's a refund, if there's disallowance, audit code, what's going on. And so at that point, hopefully in the next few days, if it's a refund, which most of it is, we will communicate that to you to let you know that it's on the way, and that for you to look out for the check. We confirm the address, make sure that is correct, because sometimes the IRS will have changed the address to the correct address, and another filing will come in and change the address to a different address, so we have to kind of change that. So we want to double check those with every refund that's processed. If there's a mistake, we'll call the IRS to pull it back to get
Typically, we have about a 2-week advance notice before you're going to get a check out of your mailbox.
notifications with questions from the IRS sent to your office. If it's a notice, yes, it should be. We should have power of attorney on file or an 8821 on file, something on file that we should get notification.
That said, the government makes mistakes.
All the time.
If you receive something, reach out. If we receive something, we will also reach out. But mistakes happen.
But yeah, it's really, really important that if you guys got a notice that, especially is something is incorrect, let us know as soon as possible, because some of these have really tight timelines and we might not get the notice for a little while. So like a 6577 notice, and that's that partial disallowance notice, we only have 25 days, I think, to respond. And so, if we lose 2 days, it kind of makes a difference. Nira, it's been a really long time for a lot of folks. If you want to reach out to me separately, I can ask my paralegal to pull your transcripts and you can see that it's still in process. But unfortunately, this is just, it's not been a very well-run program, I'll say.
Has the IRS gone after firms helping file ERC claims?
They have. There's a criminal case. That's more like completely fraudulent, where they were making up employees and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and the government lost a case against a preparer in Utah months ago. there was a big ring that was run out of a prison. They went after them. It's maybe not been the same volume that
People expect.
corresponds to some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of the IRS, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, there are COVID task force, they call them strike forces, that are made up of different parts of the government. So you may have IRS counsel, you may have somebody from the FBI, you may have somebody from Homeland, and they're working together on these cases. One is based in Baltimore, I think one's in Miami, and one's in, I want to say Sacramento, but they're looking at all this stuff, PPP, ERC, all the money that went out during COVID.
Or is like flagged to go out, right? Hasn't processed yet. Sitting there. Has the IRS processed any claims made between 9/23 and 1/24? I truly don't know off the top of my head.
Well, so I was on a call this morning with a company that tracks some of these trends. He says, yeah, I haven't seen a ton. They're tracking maybe 2% of what's out there. So I don't know if that's statistically significant, but yeah.
So Robert asked how he can find out the status of his ERC claim. You can check the transcripts, your account transcripts. You'll see when your amended return was sent for processing. Assuming you're a client of the firm, so you can ask us and we can send you a copy of your transcripts. You'd like to see, you'll see where the amended return is received and then, where it's at.
We can pull this for you.
Just email us after the presentation and we can get you with the right person to get that. Okay, perfect.
Is the claim being in manager review hopeful?
Yes. I'm assuming you mean like some of these claims, especially if there's a taxpayer advocate, there'll be some sort of like second pair of eyes where they're reviewing the claims. And sometimes that review can lead to processing. And sometimes that review can lead to more of an informal audit or sometimes an external, formal audit. So it means that it's moving, someone's looking at it, that's a good thing. It's just, it doesn't mean that you're going to get paid tomorrow.
Eric, yes, the transcripts can be pulled easily if you're a client, if we have power of attorney or an 8821 tax information authorization for you.
It depends if you have access to the business transcripts. If like you have access in the system, you should be able to pull them. But it's not that much trouble. And Eric, we should actually have yours, I think, relatively recently pulled. Any other questions? To reiterate what I said earlier, this program has not been well run, from the beginning. There's a lot of things I think that the government could have probably done differently that would have made it a lot better for small businesses. And for practitioners trying to, play with the rules that we have, and to follow them the best of our abilities. It's frustrating for us just as it is for you. I know this is a huge pain, and this is money that you've been expecting and you're not getting it, and that's a challenge. We're doing everything that we can to get this moving forward. The only other thing to do would be if you wanted to file a lawsuit or to kind of push on the taxpayer advocate. But those are the other two things that we could do other than, waiting.
Can claim status be checked online, or do we have to call the 1-800 number? Jeff, we can pull that information for you, but if you were trying to do it yourself, you probably would have to call. And you're going to sit on hold for a while, and they may not answer your call. And you get kicked off after a couple hours. So
They already agreed to send you an email.
all right, that made it sound terrible, huh?
That someone told me the other day, like, you made this sound so bad that we will not do this ourselves. Okay.
Scott, yes, we check transcripts on all the returns that we filed. And that happens every Monday. We may not, get a communication out to you that exact day, but we'll be in touch to give you an update if we see something.
I'll also say, like, after we file the returns, we check the transcripts to make sure they get the returns, to make sure originals are filed. Like, there's a lot of points within our representation that we've checked your transcripts, but at this point, all of those hurdles have been cleared, and now we're checking to see, like I said, for refund codes, but also we can check and see if there's an audit code or a disallowance code on there. And each quarter, like, you might have a disallowance code on Q3, but not on Q1, so we can kind of look and see how best to handle all of that.
An audit in this space has been very light.
Yeah.
What we would say is like a traditional audit, where you get an information document request and they're asking for very specific things.
Joe is asking about the amended income tax return issue. No clues given. I spoke to, like, the IRS press person at the time in December. He said that he thought it was going to come out early in the year, mid-February. I don't know. They're waiting on counsel, I guess, to make a decision on how best to approach it.
The taxpayer advocate, a taxpayer advocate representative, who was in the administration, not like a case representative, confirmed that something should be coming soon, but was not committal about the time frame. But it seems they're going to come up with something.
The problem everyone acknowledges, and again, this kind of goes back to just like the plagues of this program, the fact that it's 2025 and this hasn't been addressed yet, when 2020 statute's closed, is kind of unbelievable. But believable.
Yeah, one thing that came out was apparently the attorneys at the tax division had a big huddle in the last couple of weeks to try to deal with this issue and identify it and figure out how they're going to deal with it in their cases.
And obviously, there's the change in administration is going to affect all of that also. So that might be part of it. It's, there's no one at the helm to kind of bless a final decision.
Yep. And Joe, and one of the the tax return issue is challenging.
One other option, if you do need the funds immediately and you are a good candidate, we can put you in touch with some people who are willing to fund these claims. If that's your situation, reach out to us and we can see if we think that it would work out, and then offer you some referrals to that type of program. Just to be clear, we're not funders, we're not trying to buy your claim, we're not doing anything like that. But we know that some people really don't have another option, and that's what they need to do. Eric. So some have been within a few weeks, some have not. The question is, you know, why are some partial disallowances being resolved so quickly and some are taking a while? It depends on who in the government is looking at this stuff and like just how quickly they can resolve. I'm confident in these partial disallowances. I think most of them are Q2. That it's simply an IRS error and that it'll all be resolved. So, I mean, we could certainly call and check on that claim, and see what the status is. I'm assuming they're gonna say it's being worked and looked at and they'll get back to us soon. I'm not sure that's gonna actually like move the needle at all, but you know, I'm happy to do that if you'd like. Write that down so I don't forget. Joe, tough to recommend a client to pay tax on money they don't have. Got one that I expect to see their head explode at that idea. Yeah, that's a big challenge. I had a client call me off the street because she had $1 million tax liability, and you know, Peter and I are tax controversy attorneys during the day, and I asked her why she had $1 million. That's my typical question, and she said because she amended her income tax returns as soon as she claimed the ERC, hadn't received it yet, and she was a government contractor and couldn't have a lien. And like now we had this controversy where we had to stop a lien from being filed on $1 million liability because she did what she was supposed to do and filed her income tax returns timely. It can be a mess.
I've dealt with that exact same thing, not $1 million. It was like 30,000-40,000. But they re-amended. They said, screw it, I don't want it. Re-amended to fix it.
She wanted it.
Yeah, I understand.
It worked out, but like to pay for representation for me to make sure that the liens weren't there and penalties were assessed, it was kind of a mess. Any other questions while we're hanging out? Obviously, everyone is welcome to reach out to us individually. It's just we try to do this from time to time to take people's questions all at once. It's a little bit more efficient if people have the same questions, and also you may not realize you have a question and listen to somebody else's statements, and it's helpful to hear. Hopefully the next update we're doing is you know, a lot more positive with at least some more information than we have right now. Thanks, Eric. All right, well, with that, and if you guys think of questions, let us know. Eric, I'll have the attorney handle your situation, check on that disallowance, and we will go from there. Take care.